He thought he had bought nothing but trash, but what he uncovered would change his life forever. The wind howled through the small town, and the air was thick with the scent of wet earth and old pine. It was the kind of place where dreams went to die, or at least to be forgotten. The houses were old, with peeling paint and cracked windows, standing like silent witnesses to the passage of time. John Miller, a battle-worn veteran who had seen the worst life had to offer, drove his rusted pickup down the narrow, snow-dusted road, his loyal German shepherd, Max, sitting beside him in the passenger seat, alert and ready for anything. They had no place to go, no real home to call their own, but they did have each other. John had spent years drifting from one dead-end job to the next, never quite finding his footing, always haunted by the memories of a past he couldn't outrun. He wasn't expecting much when he saw the listing for a rundown barn on the edge of town. The price was too good to pass up, and John, desperate for a place to settle, decided to take the plunge. It wasn't much, a dilapidated old barn with rotting beams and an overgrown yard, but it was something, and something was better than nothing. They arrived at the property just as the last of the daylight began to fade, casting long shadows over the land. John cut the engine and stared at the barn for a moment, taking in its weathered exterior. It looked even worse up close. The roof sagged in places, and the door hung crooked on its hinges, like it might fall off at any moment. But it was his now. As he grabbed his bag and started to unload, Max leapt out of the truck and began to sniff the ground, his ears twitching. Max had always been an excellent judge of character, or in this case, a great judge of scent. John had learned to trust his dog's instincts over the years. If Max wasn't barking or growling, it was usually a good sign. They made their way inside the barn, the wooden floor creaking beneath their feet. It was dark, save for the light creeping through the gaps in the walls. The smell of old wood and mildew filled the air, but John didn't mind. He could work with this. He had no choice. The barn was a mess, filled with broken furniture, old crates, and discarded tools. But as he moved deeper into the space, he noticed something strange. At the far end of the barn, a pile of rubble seemed out of place. It wasn't just junk, there was something about it that drew him in. Max was already there, his nose close to the ground, sniffing furiously. John walked over, curiosity piqued, and bent down to take a closer look. Underneath the debris, he saw something shiny. At first, he thought it was just an old tin can or a piece of scrap metal, but as he cleared away the dirt, his heart skipped a beat. It was a box. A large, metal box, covered in rust, but unmistakably as safe. His hands trembled as he reached down to touch it. The rust had eaten away at some of the edges, but the lock was still intact. His mind raced. What could possibly be inside? His breath caught in his throat as he thought about what he had just stumbled upon. Max growled softly, his fur bristling as if to confirm that this was no ordinary find. John wiped the dirt from the box, and with a final tug, the lock broke open. Inside, there were stacks of papers, old photographs, and, hidden beneath it all, a small, velvet pouch. He opened it, and the light from the fading sun caught the glint of gold inside. Coins. Old coins, some of them gleaming with an unfamiliar sheen. His pulse quickened as he realized what he had found. This wasn't just any old junk. It was treasure. Treasure that had been buried for who knows how long, waiting for the right person to find it. John sat back on his heels, Max at his side, his mind racing with the possibilities. This discovery could change everything. The thought was almost too much to grasp, but in that moment, he knew his life was about to take an unexpected turn. I don't know what it was, but something about the box felt different, like it was calling out to him. John Miller sat back on the cold, dusty floor of the barn, the weight of what he had just uncovered sinking in. He had been hoping for a place to rest his weary bones, but instead, he had found something far more significant. The gold coins gleamed softly in the dim light, their edges worn with age, but their value unmistakable. They weren't just any coins. They looked ancient, almost as if they had been waiting for someone to find them, waiting for him. Max, his faithful German shepherd, sat by his side, sniffing at the box with his usual curiosity. The dog's ears were perked up, his amber eyes locked on the treasure, as if he understood the magnitude of the discovery. John slowly picked up one of the coins, turning it over in his hand. It was heavy, cold to the touch, and the intricate designs on its surface seemed to tell a story of a time long past. He couldn't help but wonder how it had ended up buried under all that rubble. Who had hidden it here, and why? The possibilities were endless, but one thing was clear. John's life was about to change. For the first time in a long while, he felt something other than despair, hope. Maybe this was the break he had been waiting for. He had spent years bouncing from one job to the next, never finding anything that truly gave him peace. Maybe, just maybe, this treasure was the answer he had been searching for. He thought about the small town he had settled in, the people who had all but forgotten him. Would they believe him if he told them what he had found? Or would they think he was just another fool chasing a dream? John stood up slowly, brushing the dust from his hands, and surveyed the barn. It was still in ruins, but now it felt different, like it was no longer just a place to hide. It was the beginning of something new. He could see it now, fixing up the barn, turning it into something more than just a dilapidated shell of wood and stone. He could feel the weight of the future pressing down on him. But this time, it didn't feel like a burden. It felt like an opportunity. Max let out a soft bark, as if to remind John that he wasn't alone in this. The dog had been his companion through thick and thin, always there to provide comfort when the world felt too heavy to carry. Max's presence was a constant reminder that even in the darkest of times, there was always a glimmer of light. John walked over to the pile of rubble where he had found the box and began to clear more of it away, his hands working with newfound determination. With each piece of debris he removed, he uncovered more signs of what had been hidden beneath. The more he uncovered, the clearer it became. This wasn't just a hidden treasure. It was something more. The barn itself felt like a key to unlocking a new chapter of his life. As the last of the debris was cleared away, John discovered a hidden compartment in the floor, one he had missed in his initial search. It was small, but it was there. He knelt down and pried it open, his heart pounding in his chest. Inside, there were more coins, more relics from the past, and a set of old documents. He carefully lifted one of the papers, unfolding it with trembling hands. The writing was faded, but still legible. It was a deed of some kind, but John couldn't make out all of the details. His mind raced. Was this some kind of property deed? Had he just stumbled upon an inheritance, a long-lost treasure passed down through generations? His pulse quickened as he scanned the document. The name on it was unfamiliar, but the signature at the bottom was unmistakable. It was the same name that had been written on the box, the name that had piqued his curiosity in the first place. This was no coincidence. This was his destiny. As John sat back on his heels, the pieces of the puzzle began to fall into place. He had found something far beyond a treasure of gold coins. He had found a piece of history, a legacy waiting to be uncovered. His mind raced with questions. Who was the person behind the name on the document? What did it mean for him, for his future? And most importantly, what was he going to do with all of this? The answers would come in time. But for now, John knew one thing for certain. His life had just changed forever. John stood there, staring at the faded document in his hands, his heart racing. The more he read, the more it seemed like he was unlocking a mystery far beyond anything he had ever imagined. The name on the paper, though unfamiliar, had a sense of gravity to it. He could feel the weight of history pressing down on him. Max sat quietly beside him, his amber eyes watching John as if he understood the importance of the moment. It was as if the dog had known from the start that this discovery would change everything. John's mind raced as he carefully folded the document and placed it back inside the box. This was no ordinary find. It was something much bigger, something that was calling to him, pulling him deeper into its mystery. He had no idea what the connection was, but he knew that this was his chance, a chance to turn his life around, to leave behind the struggles of his past, and step into something new. With the box in his hands, John made his way outside, the cold air hitting his face as he took a deep breath. The barn, once just a decaying structure, now felt alive with potential. The wind howled through the trees, carrying with it the scent of pine and earth, as if nature itself was whispering secrets to him. As he stood there, looking at the barn, John began to imagine what it could become. The possibilities seemed endless. The barn could be more than just a place to sleep. It could be a home, a sanctuary, a place to rebuild. He could fix it up, make it his own, and maybe, just maybe, it would be the fresh start he had been searching for all these years. But first, he needed to understand what this discovery meant. He needed answers. With Max by his side, John decided to follow the clues in the document, hoping it would lead him to the truth. The town he had settled in was small, almost forgotten by time, but it held secrets that John was determined to uncover. The next morning, after a restless night filled with thoughts of the barn and its hidden treasures, John set out to visit the local library. The library was an old building, its shelves lined with dusty books and faded newspapers. As he walked through the door, the scent of old paper and leather filled the air. The librarian, a quiet woman named Miss Clara, greeted him with a nod as he approached the counter. She had seen him around town, a man who seemed to carry the weight of the world on his shoulders, but today, there was something different about him. "Can I help you, Mr. Miller?" Miss Clara asked, her voice soft yet curious. "I need to look up some old records," John replied, his mind still focused on the document he had found. "Something to do with the history of this town." Miss Clara raised an eyebrow, but she didn't question him. Instead, she led him to a back corner of the library, where the oldest records were kept. Dust motes danced in the shafts of sunlight streaming through the windows as John carefully flipped through the brittle pages of the town's history. Hours passed as he searched, each document leading him deeper into the town's past, and yet, nothing seemed to connect to the name on the document he had found. Just as he was about to give up, something caught his eye. A name, scribbled in the margin of a page, Eliza Montgomery. The same name that had appeared on the deed. John's heart skipped a beat. Eliza Montgomery. Who was she? Why was her name written here? And what connection did she have to the treasure he had found? The answers were just out of reach, but John felt a surge of determination. He wasn't going to let this mystery slip away. With renewed resolve, John left the library and walked back to the barn, Max trotting beside him. As they approached the barn, he knew that his journey was just beginning. There were more questions to answer, more secrets to uncover, and with Max by his side, he was ready to face whatever lay ahead. The barn, once a symbol of decay, now stood before him as a beacon of hope. The adventure of a lifetime was waiting for him, and he couldn't turn back now. He was ready to discover the truth, no matter where it led him. John stood at the threshold of the barn, the setting sun casting long shadows over the old structure. The wind had picked up again, sending a chill through the air, but John barely noticed. His thoughts were consumed by the discovery he had made, the mystery that was unfolding before him. Max sat by his side, his ears perked, sensing the shift in the atmosphere as his master's thoughts raced. John had always believed that life had a way of throwing curveballs when you least expected it, but never in his wildest dreams did he think it would lead him to this moment. He felt an overwhelming sense of purpose, the kind he hadn't felt in years. It was as if this journey had been waiting for him all along, just waiting for him to take that first step. But where to go from here? The document he had found, the name Eliza Montgomery. Nothing made sense yet, but something deep inside told him that he was on the right track. The more he thought about it, the more convinced he became that this wasn't just about finding treasure. It was about uncovering something far greater, a legacy, a hidden history that had been left behind, waiting for the right person to discover it. And maybe, just maybe, that person was him. He took a deep breath, the cold air filling his lungs, and turned back to the barn. It was time to start digging deeper, both literally and figuratively. The first thing he needed to do was find out who Eliza Montgomery was, and why her name was linked to the treasure he had uncovered. The next morning, John returned to the library, determined to get answers. Miss Clara, the librarian, greeted him with a warm smile as he stepped through the door. "Back for more, Mr. Miller?" she asked, her tone light and welcoming. "Yes, I need to dig a little deeper this time," John replied, his voice steady, but the urgency in his words unmistakable. Miss Clara nodded, sensing that he was serious. She led him to the back section of the library once again, the musty smell of old books filling the air as they walked. John had spent hours yesterday poring over the town records, but today, he was going to take a different approach. This time, he would focus on finding out more about Eliza Montgomery, her life, her connection to the town, and what role she played in the history that seemed to be slowly unfolding in front of him. As he sifted through more of the old documents, his fingers brushed against a leather-bound journal. It was worn, its edges frayed from years of use. The cover was embossed with a symbol that John didn't recognize, but something about it felt important. He pulled it out carefully, dusting off the cover, and opened it. The handwriting inside was neat, flowing, and remarkably clear for its age. It took a few moments for John to focus, but as he read, the words began to paint a picture of Eliza Montgomery. She had been a strong woman, a woman ahead of her time. A widow, she had moved to the town years ago, seeking a fresh start after the loss of her husband. But what caught John's attention was her connection to the property he had purchased. Eliza Montgomery had once owned the very barn he had discovered, and it seemed that she had hidden something there, something of great value. As John read further, he learned that Eliza had been part of a secret society, one that had operated in the shadows of the town's history. The society had been dedicated to preserving valuable artifacts, protecting them from those who would misuse them. Eliza had been one of its most trusted members, and it seemed that she had left behind a hidden legacy for someone to find. John's heart pounded as he realized that he wasn't just a random person stumbling upon a forgotten treasure. This was his destiny, a path laid out for him long before he ever set foot in this town. The treasure, the legacy, had been waiting for him, but there was more to uncover. John closed the journal, his mind buzzing with the new information. He felt a mixture of excitement and fear. Excitement because he was finally beginning to piece together the puzzle, and fear because he had no idea what he was truly getting into. The mystery was deeper than he had imagined, and it was becoming clear that there was much more at stake than just gold coins and forgotten artifacts. John stood up, feeling the weight of the journal in his hands. It was time to take the next step, to follow the trail that Eliza Montgomery had left behind. He couldn't turn back now. As he made his way out of the library, Max trotted by his side, his tail wagging gently. The dog seemed to know that something big was happening, but he wasn't afraid. He was with John, as always, ready to face whatever lay ahead. Together, they would uncover the secrets of the past and discover a future that neither of them could have imagined. John's heart raced as he stood at the edge of the forest, the journal, heavy in his hands. The words written by Eliza Montgomery had painted a picture of a woman with secrets, a woman who had left behind a legacy that now seemed to be his responsibility to uncover. The wind whispered through the trees, and Max, his ever-present companion, sniffed the air, alert to the change in the atmosphere. The air was thick with mystery. John had read the journal over and over, but the more he read, the more questions arose. What was the secret society Eliza had been a part of? What had she hidden in the barn, and why was it so important? The town had always been small, quiet, forgotten by the world, but now, with every word of the journal, John could feel the weight of history pressing down on him. He wasn't just any man. He was a part of something much bigger, something that had been hidden for generations. The barn, once a place of despair, now felt like a key to a hidden world, a world John had never known existed. He needed answers, and the journal had led him to this forest, a place where the past seemed to linger in the air. The forest was dense, the trees towering above him, their branches twisting into intricate patterns that seemed to guide his path. Max trotted ahead, his nose to the ground, as if he knew exactly where to go. John followed, his mind still racing with the possibility that everything he had discovered so far was just the beginning. He reached the clearing and stopped. There, in the center, was an old stone well, its surface covered with moss and ivy. It looked ancient, as though it had been there for centuries, hidden away from the eyes of the world. The well had no obvious purpose, no sign that it had ever been used. But as John approached, he felt a pull, an invisible force urging him to look deeper. Max barked once, his tail wagging. John kneeled beside the well, his hand brushing the stones. He could feel something beneath the surface, something hidden, waiting to be uncovered. He reached down into the well, his fingers brushing against something cold and metallic. A latch. With a tug, the latch gave way, and the stone covering shifted, revealing a dark passage below. The air that rushed up from the hole smelled damp, musty, but there was something else, a faint scent of earth and something older, something buried for a long time. John's heart pounded in his chest. This was it. This was the moment he had been waiting for. The passage below was narrow, and as John descended into the darkness, he felt as if he were stepping into another world, a world that had been hidden from view for too long. Max followed closely behind, his paws silent on the stone steps. As John reached the bottom, he found himself in a small chamber, the walls lined with shelves filled with dusty books and artifacts. The room was dark, lit only by a faint, flickering light that seemed to come from nowhere. In the center of the room, a stone pedestal stood, and on top of it, an old wooden box sat, covered in a layer of dust. John's breath caught in his throat. This was the treasure. This was what Eliza had left behind. He approached the pedestal, his hands trembling as he reached for the box. It was heavier than it looked, and as he lifted it, he felt the weight of history in his palms. The box creaked as he opened it, revealing what lay inside. It was a collection of artifacts, old coins, documents, and a strange, intricately carved amulet. John stared at the amulet, his fingers tracing its design. It seemed to glow faintly, as though it had a life of its own. The coins were unlike anything John had ever seen, their designs foreign, ancient, and unlike the ones he had found in the barn. But it was the documents that caught his attention. As he carefully unrolled them, he found a map, old and worn, but still legible. The map depicted the town, but it was different from the one John knew. It showed hidden passages, underground tunnels, and symbols he didn't understand. The map was a guide to something even greater. John's mind raced as he pieced together the fragments of the puzzle. The secret society, Eliza Montgomery, the treasure, all of it was connected, and it was all leading him to something far more important than he had ever imagined. He knew this was just the beginning. The treasure was not just gold or silver. It was knowledge, it was power, and it was up to him to uncover the rest. Max barked again, his voice echoing through the chamber, as if urging John to move forward. And so he did. He had found the key. Now, it was time to unlock the rest of the mystery. With the map in hand and the artifacts safely tucked away, John climbed back to the surface, his mind focused on the journey ahead. The past had been waiting for him to discover it, and now, with Max by his side, he was ready to face whatever came next. The days that followed were a blur of action and uncertainty. John had carefully studied the map Eliza Montgomery had left behind, and with every passing moment, it became clearer that the small town he had once thought of as forgotten held far more secrets than he could have ever imagined. The more he learned about Eliza, the more he realized that the treasure she had hidden was not just material wealth. It was a key to understanding a lost history, one that stretched far beyond the boundaries of the town. He spent hours poring over the old journals and documents he had uncovered, piecing together the cryptic clues that Eliza had left for him. Max, ever loyal and watchful, stayed by his side, sensing the importance of the journey they were on together. As the sun set on yet another day, casting a golden hue across the land, John found himself standing in front of the town's old church. It was a building he had passed by countless times, never thinking twice about it. But now, with the map and the new knowledge he had gained, he felt an undeniable pull. This was the place. The map had shown a hidden tunnel beneath the church, one that led to something far more significant than anything John had ever dreamed of. The church, though worn by time, stood tall and proud, its stone walls a testament to the past. John hesitated for a moment before pushing open the heavy wooden doors, his heart pounding in his chest. Inside, the church was quiet, almost eerily so. The air smelled of old wood and incense, the faintest traces of a bygone era lingering in the air. Max sniffed around the entrance, his ears flicking back as if sensing something just beyond their reach. John stepped cautiously inside, his footsteps echoing through the vast, empty space. He glanced around, his eyes landing on the old pews and the stained glass windows that adorned the walls. The faint light filtering through the glass painted the floor with colors, casting a peaceful glow over the room. But beneath the tranquility, John knew that something important was hidden here. He made his way to the altar, where a small, ornate plaque lay embedded in the floor. The map had indicated that this was where the entrance to the hidden tunnel would be. With his hands trembling slightly, John knelt down and carefully began to remove the stones around the plaque. It took some effort, but finally, with a soft grunt, he lifted the last stone from the ground, revealing a small, dark opening below. Max barked softly, his eyes fixed on the dark abyss below. John swallowed hard, his heart racing with both fear and excitement. This was it. This was the moment he had been waiting for. He reached into his bag and pulled out a flashlight, its beam cutting through the darkness as he descended into the tunnel. The air down here was damp and cool, the walls lined with ancient stone, worn smooth by the passage of time. John moved cautiously, his flashlight illuminating the path ahead. The tunnel twisted and turned, leading him deeper into the earth. With every step, the weight of history seemed to press down on him. Max was right behind him, his movements swift and silent, a constant presence in the shadows. The tunnel eventually opened into a small, hidden chamber, its walls covered in intricate carvings and symbols. The chamber was bathed in a soft, ethereal glow, the source of which John couldn't quite place. In the center of the room stood a pedestal, and atop it, an ancient chest. John approached it slowly, his breath catching in his throat. This was what he had come for. He had no idea what lay inside, but he knew it was something of great importance. With trembling hands, John opened the chest, his heart racing in his chest. Inside, he found a collection of old manuscripts, each one carefully bound and written in a language he couldn't understand. At the very top of the chest, however, was something even more remarkable, a key. The key was made of gold, its surface covered in intricate designs, and it seemed to pulse with an energy all its own. John's mind raced as he held the key in his hands. What was it for? And why had Eliza Montgomery left it behind? Max stood at his side, his gaze fixed on the key, as if he, too, understood its significance. John carefully placed the key in his pocket and gathered the manuscripts, his mind already racing with the next step. He had found the treasure, but the mystery was far from over. This key was just the beginning, and he knew it would lead him to more answers. Answers that would finally reveal the full extent of the secret Eliza had hidden so carefully. As John made his way back to the surface, the weight of the discovery settled heavily on his shoulders. He had come here looking for a fresh start, but now, he was on the verge of uncovering a history that had been buried for generations. He was no longer just a man looking for a home. He was a part of something much bigger, something that had been waiting for him all along. With Max by his side, John knew that the journey ahead would be full of challenges and revelations, but he was ready. He was determined to uncover the truth, no matter where it led him. John stood at the edge of the forest, the weight of the golden key in his pocket pressing against his side. The discovery he had made in the hidden chamber beneath the church had set his mind racing, but the mystery was far from over. With the ancient manuscripts and the key now in his possession, he knew there were still many pieces of the puzzle left to uncover. Max stood beside him, his body tense and alert, as if sensing that something important was about to happen. The path ahead was unclear, but John could feel the pull of the unknown guiding him forward. The air was cool, the sun beginning to dip below the horizon, casting a warm glow over the forest. The journey had led him this far, and he couldn't help but wonder what the next step would bring. He had come to this town looking for a fresh start, and now he was tangled in a mystery that stretched back generations. The key he had found, however, was more than just a physical object. It was a symbol, a piece of a much larger puzzle. It had been hidden for a reason, and John was determined to uncover its significance. With a deep breath, he set off toward the barn, the place where it all began. As he walked, his thoughts returned to Eliza Montgomery, the woman whose legacy he was now a part of. What had she known? What had she hidden? And why had she chosen him to be the one to find it? The barn, once a decaying structure that had offered him little more than shelter, now felt like a place of great importance. He had already uncovered so much, yet he knew there was more waiting for him. The barn had always been a symbol of his struggles, but now it represented something far more profound. It was a gateway to a hidden history, and he had only just begun to scratch the surface. When he arrived at the barn, he took a moment to pause and look at the place. The worn wooden beams creaked in the wind, and the overgrown weeds seemed to have taken over every corner of the yard. It was still as run down as it had been when he first bought it, but now it felt different. The barn had become a bridge between the past and the present, a place where the secrets of the town's history were waiting to be discovered. John stepped inside, his flashlight cutting through the darkness as he made his way toward the corner where the old chest had been. The artifacts he had found earlier lay carefully packed away in his bag, but now he needed to take the next step. He needed to find the connection between the key and the hidden treasure. As he approached the chest, something caught his eye. The floorboards in front of it seemed to be slightly raised, as if there was something hidden underneath. John's heart skipped a beat as he crouched down and pried up one of the boards. Beneath it, he found a small compartment, its contents hidden beneath years of dust and neglect. He reached inside and pulled out a leather-bound book, its pages yellowed with age. The book was thick, its cover adorned with strange symbols that John had never seen before. He carefully opened it, flipping through the pages until he found something that made his heart race. It was a map, just like the one Eliza had left behind. But this map was different. It was more detailed, and it seemed to show the hidden locations of other treasures that had been hidden in the town for generations. The map also had annotations written in Eliza's handwriting, notes about secret tunnels, hidden chambers, and cryptic messages. John's mind raced as he read through the pages. The map was a guide, a blueprint for something far greater than anything he had imagined. This wasn't just about gold or silver. It was about uncovering a lost history, a history that had been hidden in plain sight. The more he read, the more he realized that Eliza had been part of something far bigger than a simple treasure hunt. She had been protecting something, a secret society that had worked to preserve the town's history and keep it safe from those who would exploit it. But who else knew about this society? And why had Eliza chosen him to find it? The questions swirled in his mind, but there was no time to waste. He needed to follow the map to uncover the rest of the story. With the key in hand and the book clutched tightly to his chest, John felt a renewed sense of purpose. This was his journey, and it was just beginning. As he looked over at Max, who stood by his side, his eyes bright with curiosity, John knew they were in this together. The path ahead was uncertain, but one thing was clear. They would uncover the secrets of the past, no matter what it took. The legacy of Eliza Montgomery was waiting to be uncovered, and John Miller was ready to take the next step in the adventure that had become his destiny. John stood at the edge of the forest, the wind picking up as it rustled the leaves overhead. The key was still tucked safely in his pocket, but it no longer felt like just a metal object. It felt like a promise, a sign that everything he had worked for was finally coming together. Max, his ever-reliable companion, stood by his side, sniffing the air and looking up at him with those knowing eyes. There was something about Max that seemed to understand the weight of their journey. Together, they had already uncovered so much, but now, as John stared out into the vast expanse of trees and shadows, he could sense that the hardest part was still ahead of them. The map, the book, the artifacts, all of it had led him here, to this very moment. But what now? He had already begun to understand the significance of the key and the map, and he had pieced together enough of Eliza Montgomery's legacy to know that the town held secrets much older than he had ever imagined. The hidden chambers, the underground tunnels, the treasures left behind, all of it had been guarded for generations, protected by those who understood its importance. But John was different. He wasn't just some outsider anymore. He was part of the story, part of the puzzle, and with each new discovery, the threads of the mystery were weaving together. The time for hesitation had passed. He needed to follow the map, but where it would lead him, he couldn't say. His mind raced with questions. What had Eliza Montgomery been protecting? Who else knew about the hidden treasures beneath the town? And why had she left him the key? These questions swirled in his mind as he made his way toward the barn, the one place that had become both a symbol of his struggles and the beginning of his new path. As he approached the barn, the sun was beginning to set, casting long shadows across the yard. The once worn building now stood taller in his eyes, a monument to the journey he had started and the one that lay ahead. Inside, the barn was quiet, but it no longer felt like a place of abandonment. It felt like a place of discovery. John had come here seeking refuge, but now it felt like something more, a sanctuary for secrets long buried, waiting for the right person to find them. He walked over to the old chest where he had first found the artifacts, the ones that had started it all. As he reached down to open it again, something caught his eye, a faint glimmer of light from the corner of the room. He turned toward it, his heart pounding with anticipation. The light was coming from a crack in the floorboards. It was barely noticeable, but it was there, faint but steady, as if something was beckoning him forward. Without a second thought, he moved toward it, Max close behind. He crouched down and carefully pried the floorboard up, revealing a hidden compartment beneath. Inside, he found a small box, its surface covered in dust and grime. It looked old, very old, but it was unlike anything he had seen before. With trembling hands, he reached for the box and pulled it out of its hiding place. As he opened it, his breath caught in his throat. Inside, there was another map, more intricate than the one he had found earlier. This map was different. It depicted the town in far greater detail, showing hidden locations and secret paths that had been lost to time. But what stood out the most was the symbol at the center of the map, a symbol that matched the one on the key. John's pulse quickened as he realized the connection. This map, this key, it was all part of a larger plan, one that Eliza had set in motion long ago. But what was the plan? And what did it mean for him now? His thoughts were interrupted as Max let out a low growl, his eyes fixed on the back of the room. John turned toward him, his heart racing. The growl wasn't one of warning, it was one of curiosity. Max had sensed something he couldn't see, but he knew it was there. Slowly, John made his way to the back of the room, his steps careful, deliberate. The air felt thicker here, as if something was just out of reach, waiting to be discovered. He reached out and touched the wall, feeling the cool stone beneath his fingertips. There, hidden in the shadows, was another passage, a narrow, almost invisible door that seemed to blend into the wall itself. John's breath caught in his throat. This was it. The door was the next step, the next clue in the mystery that had begun with Eliza Montgomery and had now led him to this moment. With a deep breath, he pushed the door open, the hinges creaking in protest. What lay beyond would change everything. Max barked once, then slipped through the door ahead of him, his instincts guiding him. John followed, his heart pounding in his chest. Whatever lay ahead, he knew one thing for certain. The journey was far from over. It was just beginning. John stepped through the narrow door, his flashlight beam dancing across the dark, cool space beyond. The air smelled of earth and ancient stone, thick with the scent of something long hidden. Max was already ahead of him, sniffing the ground, his ears pricked and his tail stiff with alertness. John felt a surge of adrenaline, his heart pounding in his chest. He had no idea what awaited him beyond the door, but he knew one thing for sure. This was it, the moment that would reveal everything. The passage was tight, the walls close on either side, but the floor was smooth, as if well trodden over time. They moved forward slowly, John keeping his flashlight steady, casting long shadows on the stone walls. There was no turning back now. The journey had led him here, and whatever lay ahead, he was ready to face it. The passage twisted and turned, each step taking them deeper into the earth. Max moved ahead, his nose working the air, sensing something John couldn't yet see. The path seemed endless, but eventually, it began to open up. They reached a small chamber, its walls covered in the same intricate carvings John had seen in the barn. The air felt different here, more alive, somehow, as if the very room itself held secrets. The light from the flashlight revealed more carvings, and John felt a chill run down his spine. These were no ordinary markings. They were ancient, deliberately crafted symbols that seemed to pulse with an energy of their own. John could feel it in his bones. This was the heart of it all, the place Eliza Montgomery had protected. He stepped forward, drawn to the center of the room, where a large stone pedestal stood. The pedestal was simple, unadorned, yet there was something about it that felt sacred. John approached it cautiously, his hand reaching out instinctively. As he touched the stone, a sudden vibration ran through the floor, and for a moment, everything seemed to shift. The walls seemed to hum, the very air thickening as if the room itself had come alive. Max stood at his side, his eyes wide, his body tense. The dog barked once, a sharp, urgent sound that echoed off the walls. John's breath caught in his throat as he stepped back. The pedestal had shifted slightly, revealing something hidden beneath it. With trembling hands, John reached down and pulled open a hidden compartment in the base of the pedestal. Inside, there was a small, old chest, intricately carved with symbols that matched the ones on the walls. His heart skipped a beat as he carefully opened it. Inside was a stack of old parchment, worn with age, and a single object resting on top of it, a golden key. The key was identical to the one he had found earlier, but this one felt different. It felt heavier, more significant, as though it had been waiting for him all this time. He took the key into his hand, the weight of it grounding him, and looked at the scrolls beneath it. Carefully, he lifted one of the parchments, and his eyes scanned the faded script. It was written in the same language he had seen before, the same language Eliza had used in her journals. This time, however, the words were clearer. The message on the parchment was a map, much like the one John had already uncovered, but this one showed even more detail. It depicted a hidden location outside the town, a place John had never seen or heard of before. His fingers trembled as he traced the path on the map with his eyes. It led to a mountain he had crossed many times before but had never thought twice about. But now, he knew, the mountain was the key. It was the final piece of the puzzle, the place where everything would come together. John closed the chest, the weight of the key and the map settling in his hands. This was the culmination of everything Eliza Montgomery had left behind. She had hidden the truth, kept it buried for generations, but now it was his turn to bring it to light. Max barked again, his voice filled with purpose, and John knew that his loyal companion was ready for the next step. They weren't finished yet. They had a journey ahead of them, and this time, it would lead them to the heart of the mystery. With the key in his pocket and the map tucked safely away, John made his way back toward the entrance of the hidden chamber, the path clear in his mind. The town, the secrets, the legacy, it was all coming to a head, and nothing would stop him from uncovering the truth. Together, with Max by his side, John was ready to face whatever lay ahead. The final chapter of the mystery was about to unfold. John stood at the foot of the mountain, the map clutched tightly in his hand. The journey had brought him here, to this point, the final destination of a path laid out by Eliza Montgomery. The sun was just beginning to rise, casting a soft glow across the landscape, and for the first time in a long while, John felt a sense of peace. The weight of the key in his pocket reminded him that this was no ordinary journey. It was a quest to uncover something ancient, something that had been buried for centuries, waiting for the right person to find it. Max, ever faithful, stood by his side, his eyes scanning the surroundings, sensing the importance of this moment. They had come a long way from the small town that had once been nothing more than a place to escape the chaos of the world. But now, everything had changed. John had learned that the town held secrets that were far older than he had ever imagined. The barn, the hidden chamber beneath the church, the key, all of it had led him here, to this mountain, where the final piece of the puzzle lay waiting. He took a deep breath, feeling the crisp morning air fill his lungs. The path up the mountain was steep, the terrain rocky and uneven, but John had no hesitation. He had come this far, and there was no turning back now. Max bounded ahead, his energy unwavering, eager to discover what lay at the top. John followed, his steps steady, his mind focused on the journey ahead. As he climbed higher, the air grew thinner, and the weight of the world seemed to lift from his shoulders. The climb was challenging, but it felt right, as though every step was bringing him closer to the truth. After what felt like hours, they finally reached the summit. The view from the top was breathtaking. The town lay far below, a small speck in the vast landscape, and beyond it, the horizon stretched endlessly, a sea of green forests and winding rivers. John stood there for a moment, taking it all in, feeling the weight of the journey settle into his bones. But the moment was fleeting. There, nestled in the heart of the mountain, was a cave entrance, half hidden by the overgrown foliage. The map had led him here, and now, as he approached the cave, he knew this was the place. Been long, but it had led him to this moment, this discovery, and now, John knew his purpose. He wasn't just a man searching for a home. He was a guardian of something much larger, something that would change everything. The cave, the artifacts, the legacy of Eliza Montgomery, it was all part of a greater plan, one that John had been chosen to fulfill. With the scrolls in hand and the key still heavy in his pocket, John took a deep breath and stepped out of the cave, ready to begin the next chapter of his journey. The past had been waiting for him to discover it, and now, the future was in his hands. John stood at the edge of the forest, the weight of the scrolls in his bag pressing against his back. The air was still, the faint rustling of the leaves the only sound that filled the silence. It had been a long journey, but now, standing on the mountain, looking out over the vast land below, everything felt right. The final pieces of the puzzle had fallen into place. Eliza Montgomery's legacy, the key, the artifacts, the hidden chambers. It was all leading him to this moment, to this future. But as he looked out over the landscape, John couldn't shake the feeling that the journey wasn't over yet. There was something else, something hidden deeper in the town's past, something waiting to be discovered. He had found so much, but he knew there was still more to uncover. Max, his loyal companion, sat beside him, looking up at John with those wise, amber eyes. The dog had been with him every step of the way, from the moment they had walked into the abandoned barn to the dark, hidden chambers beneath the church. Max was more than just a pet. He was part of this journey, part of the discovery. John smiled, reaching down to ruffle Max's fur. "We're not done yet, boy," he muttered, more to himself than to the dog. The wind shifted, and for a moment, John felt a strange sense of peace wash over him. It was as if the land itself was telling him that he was on the right path. But peace didn't mean the journey was over. It only meant that he had found something worth protecting. The map Eliza had left behind was more than just a guide to hidden treasures. It was a blueprint for something much greater. The scrolls he had uncovered, the ancient symbols, the key, they all pointed to a deeper truth, something that had been guarded for centuries. It was up to him to protect it now. But where to start? He knew the town well enough by now, having lived there for some time, but it wasn't the town that had held the answers. The real secrets lay hidden beneath the surface, in the places most people had long forgotten. John turned and started walking down the path that led back to the town. Max followed at his side, his steps light and quick, as if he too understood the importance of what lay ahead. They had made it this far, but there was still more to uncover. The town was small, quiet, but there was a history to it, a history buried deep in the earth. As John walked, the sun began to set, casting long shadows over the dirt road. The path back to the town felt familiar, but now it felt different. He wasn't just a man trying to find a place to call home anymore. He was part of something much bigger, a guardian of secrets, of history, of Eliza Montgomery's legacy. The journey had led him here, to this moment, and he knew that the town was just the beginning. There was more to uncover, more to protect, and he was ready for it. The light from the setting sun bathed the town in a soft glow, making the buildings look almost dreamlike. John walked through the streets, his mind focused on what he had learned, on what he still needed to uncover. Max stayed close, his eyes scanning the surroundings as they walked. The town was quiet, peaceful even, but John knew better now. The secrets it held weren't on the surface. They were hidden deep, and it was his job to bring them to light. He reached the small cabin he had been staying in, and for the first time in a long while, he felt a sense of belonging. It wasn't just the cabin that felt like home. It was the journey he had taken, the discoveries he had made, the purpose he had found. He opened the door and stepped inside, Max following close behind. The fire in the hearth crackled softly, casting a warm glow over the room. John placed his bag on the table and sat down, the weight of the scrolls and the key now feeling like a reminder of what lay ahead. The map had led him here, but it was only the beginning. He had found the treasure, the legacy, but now it was time to protect it. He had learned what Eliza Montgomery had known, that some things were too important to be lost to time, and it was his job to make sure they weren't. Max laid down beside the fire, his eyes closing as he settled in for the night. John stared into the flames, his thoughts still racing. The journey was far from over, but he was ready for whatever came next. He had uncovered the past, but the future was waiting. And with Max by his side, he would face whatever challenges lay ahead, ready to protect the secrets of the town, ready to protect the legacy that had been entrusted to him.